Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to stand before you on this wonderful day. And I'm not talking just about the weather. Today is wonderful because of the event for which we've gathered, to honor one of our own, General Bernard A. Shriever. Joining us in this occasion today are some very special people. Let me take the opportunity to introduce some of those with us, beginning with our honoree, General Bernard A. Shriever. General Shriever is the former commander of Air Force Systems Command. He's known by most of us in this crowd, the military community, and many others, as the father of the American ballistic missiles and the military space program. Also with us is our Vice Chief of Staff, General Thomas S. Moorman, Jr. He is joined by his beautiful wife, Barbara Moorman. We also have Lieutenant General Richard Henry. You know, I was about to say that he's a retired Lieutenant General, but I've been working for this guy for the past year. Let me tell you, he's not retired. General Henry is the president of our Air Force Space and Missile Museum Foundation. Also with us today is his lovely wife, Cherry. My boss, Commander of the 45th Space Wing, Brigadier General Bob Henson. And we also have his lovely and energetic wife, Karen. In the audience, we're proud to have Major General Bob Dickman, the DoD Space Architect, Brigadier General Steve Boone, Air Force Space Command's Director of Plans, Lieutenant General and Mrs. Forrest McCartney. I saw him here a minute ago. There he is. There you go. He's Vice President of Launch Operations, Lockheed Martin. I know they wanted to be with us today. We have Dr. Dick Hallion, the Air Force historian. And Congressman Dave Weldon really wanted to be here today. He couldn't make it, but he sent someone to represent him. Mr. Kump, I see you there. Glad to have you. I would be remiss if I failed to introduce or recognize two very special groups with us today. The first group, affectionately known as the Old Timers. So good to have you with us today. Also spread throughout the crowd are some folks in blue shirts. These are our Air Force Space and Missile Museum volunteers. Today couldn't happen without those folks. Of those volunteers, there's some particularly special thanks for making this day come about. Mr. Roger McCormick, Mark Tim, Al and Esther Hartman, Tom Cave, Mike Myrick, Gary Harris, and Cliff Lethridge. Okay, you probably heard enough of me, so we'll get on with the program. It is my pleasure to introduce to you my wing commander, General Bob Henson.
Good morning, everyone. It is indeed a delight for us to welcome you to this ceremony today. It's my pleasure on behalf of the men and women of the 45th Space Wing, the best space launch operation in the world, to a ceremony today that captures certainly the father of what we do every day. General Shriever is certainly a man we all admire and one that we are making this dedication to do, and I think you will all be pleased at the efforts that have gone into this. I would like to thank all of those folks that have made this happen. It has not gone without much effort, and your efforts are making history here in this event today. You know, our former president, John F. Kennedy, once said, "Some men see things and say, why? I dream of things that never were and say, why not?" I think General Shriever, in his era, captured that very, very well. And we are here today in large respects because of the contributions of General Shriever and the men and women of that era that helped us launch into the operations that we have today. We are where we are in space, a new frontier that we will embark on for years. It is a new battlefront for us that wear the uniform of our country today, and it is indeed a pleasure for us to present this exhibit today in honor of General Shriever and those folks that worked with him and for him during that day. And we certainly want to thank you for being a part of this historic event today. This is indeed one that we are very proud of here at the 45th Space Wing at Cape Canaveral, and we're delighted to have you all here. We have many distinguished visitors, and you all are special, and we're glad that you are here with us today. Thank you very much.
Colonel Mormon.
Good morning. General Shriever, General Henry, members of the schoolhouse, veterans from Arva Vita, men and women of the Air Force, retired and active. What a great day, huh? I know this is the fulfillment of a lot of folks who've worked very hard, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this exhibit. I already notice an awful lot of change from the last time I was here in March, and so I commend you for it. Clearly, we honor today an exhibit that is dedicated to General Benny Shriever, and you've already heard he is clearly the father of the ballistic missile business as well as the military space program. Those are big words. That is a significant legacy when you think about the fact that he is responsible for one leg of the strategic triad, developed the Atlas, the Thor, and the Titan missiles, and he developed systems that literally propelled us into space. This evening, I understand part of our celebrations will be in honor of the 50th anniversary of the Air Force. Today is clearly an historical event. Today we salute our history. And we started last Wednesday with kicking off the Air Force's 50th anniversary. And our theme is Golden Legacy, Boundless Future. I want to talk a little bit about that and develop that theme a bit for you. If I look around, today is clearly a celebration of that golden legacy. Everything around you is part of a celebration of our heritage. This museum is one of 14 in our museum system. It is the museum wherein we display our heritage for the missile and the space business. This is the most extensive collection of military space and missile hardware. Again, I really commend folks because the distance that you have come in a very short time in building this is really commendable. And I know in the last year you've worked tremendously hard. This morning I was interviewed by the Missileer, and one of the questions was, why do you celebrate your history? And I think I can capture that in a couple of sentences, and I think it's very important this morning. You celebrate your history because it is important to look back on the people and the systems that were developed. It's extraordinarily important to understand your legacy, understand where you came from. That's really why we are doing the 50th anniversary. And I think it will provide a tremendous springboard for the 21st century. A lot of the things you see here today is a celebration of hardware. But in putting General Shriever's name to it, we celebrate the individuals and the people involved. General Shriever got on me about 2 or 3 months ago. I went out and was privileged to receive the Shriever Award. And I talked a lot about General Shriever, and he is a man who is tremendously modest, and he has been needling me ever since. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about General Shriever. I'm going to reserve my remarks for this evening. I want to talk some more about him. But one thing I would like to leave with you is that this is a man of significant vision. This is a man who I believe deserves to be up there in the pantheon of great Air Force leaders. The United States Air Force looks the way it does today because of a handful of people, and in that handful, I can guarantee you General Shriever belongs. And I'm going to quote a couple of things that were quotes about 40 years ago that I think are timeless. And let me begin with a quote about our ICBM program. And I think this is 1958. It said, "It's hard to believe that one weapon, no matter how powerful, can by itself enforce peace in this uneasy world. But we are confident that weapons like the ICBM and the IRBM will help the Air Force to enable the free world to maintain deterrent forces which no aggressor in his right mind would dare to challenge." 1958. We recently, that is within 5 years, celebrated the winning of the Cold War. The reason we won the Cold War is that we steadfastly maintained that military might and that deterrent posture. And you are looking at an individual today who is responsible for that. And I hope all of you all that worked in LA in the early days feel a sense of victory and your contribution to winning the Cold War, because you really deserved it. The other part of the 50th anniversary, we looked to boundless future. And I want to tell you that space and missiles are an integral part of that. The Chief of Staff, General Ron Fogelman, has kicked off a long-range planning effort that looks into the future. And we're looking out to 2025. I don't know how well we'll be able to look that far in the future, but one thing to be sure, I can tell you that space and missiles will be extraordinarily important. I think it is interesting that within the last 5 years we have seen space added to the mission statement, and I think that the investment that we see in space now, in an era when we're downsizing the budget, should make you all feel good about your role in that, and should make the Space Coast here pleased, because part of that investment is a new expendable launch vehicle. It'll be launched out of here at Patrick. But as I look out further, space is going to become more and more important. And General Shriever had another quote, which I think is prophetic, or it's certainly words to live by. And if I can find it here. This is the best statement I know of, a visionary statement that predicts where ultimately we're going to go in space. And this one was in 1957. General Shriever will probably tell you he got in a little trouble for this quote, but it is timeless. And this was to a Time magazine reporter. And I quote, "Several decades from now, the important battles may not be sea battles or air battles, but space battles. And we should be spending a certain fraction of our resources to ensure that we do not lag in obtaining space superiority." 1957. I don't know anybody who has said it better, and I don't know anyone who has predicted the future better. So it is a great privilege for Barbara and me to be here. I marked this on my calendar about 6 months ago. Not only to honor the individual who meant so much to the Air Force and has meant so much to the Air Force, but also to honor the folks who were in the crowd, the alumni, because you are our pioneers, and we very much appreciate what you have done for us, and I hope that we'll continue your legacy. Thank you so very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. General Shriever, General Mormon. This exhibit, the Shriever Era exhibit, is the result of a team effort involving the Air Force Space and Missile Systems Center, the Shriever Chapter 147 in Los Angeles of the Air Force Association, the 45th Space Wing, companies of the aerospace industry, the Foundation, and many, many private citizens. The project could not have gotten started without the support of Lieutenant General Les Lyles, commander then of the Space and Missile Center and who wanted to be here. His history office provided valuable historical information, and one of his engineering officers, Major Jim Rosalanka, provided in his off-duty time the outstanding work to laying out the exhibit and working through the details of putting it together. The Shriever Chapter 147 of the AFA managed the project from start to finish and led the fundraising effort with the aerospace companies. The chairman, retired Lieutenant General Don Cromer, formed a management committee consisting of Chairman Bob Marone from TRW, retired Air Force Colonel Frank Christie, Art Maffei from Boeing, Jim Shoemaker from Hughes, and Bob Wickwire. Thanks to their outstanding work and Bob Marone's leadership, it all came together on time and on budget. We know and we hope that you will like what they have put together. A coalition of companies whose heritage dates back to the 50s when the Shriever era began provided 2/3 of the financial support that we needed. We remember Cy Ramo and Dean Woolridge, who formed the Guided Missile Research Division, whose superb technical support helped bring the ballistic missile force through development and into the field. It became Thompson Ramo Woolridge and is now TRW Space and Electronics Group headed by Tim Hanneman. We remember Convair, who built the Atlas, the Glenn L. Martin Company, who built the Titan, the Lockheed Aircraft Company, who built the Agena and the Discoverer Corona satellites, and now Lockheed Martin Astronautics, led by Jim McAnally. We remember the Douglas Aircraft Company, who built and deployed the Thor IRBM in record time and is now McDonnell Douglas Space and Defense Systems, led by Bill Olson. The Hughes Aircraft Company built the first geosynchronous communications satellite and is now the Hughes Space and Communications Company, headed by retired Lieutenant General Don Cromer. We remember North American Aviation, who built the engines for the Atlas and the Thor and built the guidance for the Minuteman, and now the Rockwell Aerospace and Defense, headed by John McCluskey. We remember Dr. Charles Draper, who pioneered inertial guidance systems, and we now have the Charles Stark Draper Laboratory, led by retired Major General Ralph Jacobson. We remember the Boeing Airplane Company, who deployed the Minuteman and is now the Boeing Space and Defense Group under Jerry King. We remember the Aerojet Company, who built the Titan engines and is now GenCorp Aerojet under Roger Ramsire. And we remember Pan Am World Services, who ran our range support. It is now Johnson Controls, who have done a magnificent job supporting the museum under the Launch Base Support Contract. Jim Hoban is a local manager under the corporate leadership of Bob Dickhouse. Lieutenant Colonel Ev Thomas, commander of the Cape Canaveral Air Station, who runs me ragged, and his museum director, Emily Perry, worked mightily to prepare the museum for the exhibit. This museum has never looked better than it does today. Retired Colonel Lynn Wolf of the Foundation has done a heroic job getting it all together on behalf of the Foundation. The remaining third of the financial support for this exhibit came from private citizens. More than 10% of the total, or almost $20,000, was contributed by the Shriever Space and Missile old-timers, many of whom are here today. The Brevard County Civilian Military Affairs Council sponsors an annual golf tournament and in support of the museum, and this year they contributed more than $10,000. The Cape Canaveral Missile Space and Range Pioneers put out a special mailing, and we have received more than $4,000 in individual contributions. And finally, there are the many individual contributions made by visitors who came through the museum, about 65,000 last year. This exhibit describes the Shriever era, an era that played a key role in deterring a nuclear holocaust during a very difficult period of the Cold War. It also triggered the expansion of Cape Canaveral to the busy spaceport that it is today. It made Cape Canaveral the Kitty Hawk of the space age. This is the right place for this exhibit. It is also the right place to be the home of the Air Force Missile and Space Heritage. Some 3.5 years ago, General Jimmy Morrell, then commander of the 45th Space Wing, asked the Foundation to embark on a fundraising project for the construction of a museum visitor center at the South Gate. Last year, 12 months ago, the Foundation was asked to put its fundraising on hold until Space Command and Headquarters Air Force approval was forthcoming. General Hinson, should that approval ever come, please know that the exhibit is designed so that the Air Force will have the option of moving it into this new facility. And now, as chairman of the Air Force Space and Missile Museum Foundation, it is a pleasure and distinct privilege, in accordance with Air Force Instruction 51-601, paragraph 2.4.5, offer this gift valued as $154,000 as a gift to the United States Air Force. And now I want to do something that I have never done before. In October of 1955, I was the 45th officer to report into Arborvita in what was then the Western Development Division, and I met a young gentleman named Brigadier General Shriever. He tells the story, and I'm going to preempt him on that, is that in that time frame he had asked SAC for a liaison officer to the ICBM program, and they sent this lousy captain. And ever since then, he has been my hero and my mentor, and it's my privilege and pleasure to do something I've never done before, and that's introduce him, General Shriever.
Well, everything that Dick said is true, except that I never called him a lousy captain. That's a lie. But first of all, I'm not going to say very much. I'm, of course, very honored, but I'm very humble that something should be named by the Shriever name. That's as important as missiles in space have been and will be in the future as far as our national security is concerned. There's another problem, too. You know, if something gets named after you, you wonder what's behind you and running real fast to catch up. We had a Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Hap Arnold, who was the only 5-star general we've had in the Air Force to date. He had great vision. I served under him as a second lieutenant at March Field back in the early 30s. He asked von Karman, a leading scientist in the world as far as aviation was concerned, to do a study, and he asked in that study, determine, that was right after the war ended, determine the feasibility of a reconnaissance satellite. He also created the RAND Corporation, asked them to determine the same capability. Do we, or have we reached a point in time where a reconnaissance satellite and long-range missiles are possible? So that started a long time ago, to be one of the great objectives of the Air Force. Now, with respect to the kickoff of the ICBM program, which really happened because of the thermonuclear breakthrough and the lightweight weapon that could be launched long distances at a reasonable price. That started the ICBM program in the early 1950s, 1953, 54 to be exact. And as General Henry pointed out, it was not done by one individual, but a team that really consisted of the Air Force people, the scientific community, which strongly endorsed the ICBM program and space programs that followed, and industry. And today, there's no question we have the best Air Force in the country, and it is the major element of our, that is, space and missile activity is a major element of making our Air Force the best in the world. And as we look ahead, in my opinion, we certainly have the manpower that has the capability of carrying what we did back then further, much further, in the 21st century. So stay in there and pitch, because I've met most of you and I know what you can do. We've got the smartest people that we've ever had in the Air Force. If the politicians will just let us get the job done, we'll get it done. So let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, General Shriever, I think it's now time that we go ahead and cut the ribbon.
You got one that'll work, huh?
There you go. Come on in.
Ah, it worked.
There you go.
You got one that, see, they only put me halfway in that picture.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Get that ribbon cut, sir? I like this.
Cut me off.
You get that ribbon cut? No. Well, welcome to your exhibit. Welcome to your exhibit. I hope you like this.
The watercolor.
Huh?
Yeah, that's the Time magazine.
We're going to try to get the cover of the magazine.
That was that's the.
That was one of the things you donated to us, General Shriever. Remember? Generals, if you go to your left, I'm going to ask to be here.